Is my practice too large to join an RIA? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is episode number 118. Hi, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, where I help you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition your practice to the RIA model. If you're not already there, if you start out by heading on over to transitiontoria.com, you can find all of the resources I make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, all kinds of things to help you better understand the model. Again, transitiontoria.com. Okay, on today's episode, it's almost like the inverse of a question I often get asked. So quite frequently I'm asked, hey, is my practice large enough to start my own RIA? And I've done a couple episodes on that. Today we're going to be talking about, is your practice perhaps too large to join an RIA? And so as kind of the background on that, keep in mind there's multiple ways you could transition your practice into the model. And so as an example, one path is perhaps starting your own RIA, and there are pros and cons to that approach. Another path is to join an existing RIA solution, and there are pros and cons to that approach. I help advisors down both paths. I talk about both paths frequently on these episodes, and so there's some reasons one path might be better for you than the other path that go beyond just what we're going to be talking about today's episode. But because I'm at times asked, hey, how big do I need to be start RIA? It does beg the question, hey, is there a point where you're too big to maybe join an RIA? And so I want to give you a couple thoughts and a couple takeaways on this episode around that topic. But I would start by pointing out, and I rant about this at times, if you ever ask this question to someone, or you ask the question, am I large enough to start an RIA or whatever, anytime if someone gives you an immediate answer that has a number in it, or doesn't even know how big your practice is before they give you an answer, you have to immediately discount whatever they're going to say after that point, because you have to question what their motivations are to give you that answer to address it that way. Perhaps it's the solution they're selling that they're trying to sell you a solution, so they're going to provide an answer based on the question that aligns with their solution, kind of thing. So, or they just simply don't know how the different options work. They only know how one option works. And so it doesn't matter what your size is, they have an answer that they're going to give no matter what you say the size of your practice is. And so just be careful with anyone that gives an immediate answer to that, or gives some line in the sand answer that, oh, once you're above this size, you should definitely have your own RIA, or oh yeah, if you're not this size, you should not have your own RIA. Anyone that's given a black and white answer, again, either doesn't know what they're talking about, or they have motivations for giving you that kind of line in the sand answer. It's much more nuanced. So what I'm going to try to do on this episode is help you understand what some of those nuances are, to know how it might apply to, is there a size that some could argue you're too big to now be joining an RIA? Again, that's what we're going to talk about here. So a couple thoughts. For starters, I think if you went back 10, 20 years ago, it's very fair to perhaps assume or conclude that there is a size advisor, a size team that's just not going to be able to join an existing RIA, because there were no, back then, attractive existing RIA solutions that could handle perhaps a $1 billion team joining them. That was accurate, again, 10, 20 years ago. The marketplace has evolved tremendously to the point where there are solutions that can accommodate that so-called corner office team. And whether we want to call that a billion or higher, it's with a B, it's just a good example that very large teams do break away nowadays, and some of them start their own RIA, and then others, for reasons we'll kind of get into when I talk about these episodes, decide that joining an existing RIA platform, an existing RIA solution is the better path for them. And there are some, it's clearly not all, but there are some that can accommodate very large teams. So don't think there is necessarily a point where, that can't happen. There was a time that was the case. Now, I would preface it, every advisor, every team is unique and different, and there's other variables perhaps a large team might not be able to or want to join an existing RIA, that perhaps you have several billion and there's very unique services that you provide for these clients, and it's just not a good fit for any of the existing RIA solutions based on what you want to provide your clients. And perhaps you do need to start your own RIA because of your specific unique service model. But in most instances, that's not the case, because most of these large advisor teams that are exploring this, hey, which path should I take, are at perhaps like a large wirehouse firm where the guardrails of that large wirehouse firm is not letting them do too many esoteric things anyway. So replicating that practice in the RIA model is typically not an issue. But if you aspire to do certain things, perhaps have an in-house hedge fund kind of thing alongside your core offering, that's just not going to be a fit for many or most existing RIA platforms, even if they can handle your size. So just know that there's multiple variables that go in it. And I'm not going to blindly say, well, there's solutions out there that can handle large RIAs. I'm not going to blindly say that will always work out regardless. Again, the devil's in the details. You got to look at that. Kind of related to that, the next point I'll make is also don't assume, and this actually applies to whether you want to start your own RIA or join an RIA. There certainly was a time where the RIA marketplace, the resources for the RIA ecosystem had not evolved to be on par with the big legacy, for instance, wirehouse firms. And so that was the argument for a long time, that the wirehouse firms could, previously, not currently, make that, oh, wow, the technology in the RIA space is not as good. The access to investment solutions for your clients is not as good. The resources are not as good. There was a time, like 10, 20, 30 years or whatever, that was accurate. That is no longer the case. So keep that in mind. Again, this applies to whether you start your own RIA or join in one, but the ecosystem that supports the RIA model has evolved so much so that I will absolutely argue that not only is it on the resources available is on par, in most cases, those resources are better than what you have available to you currently at, say, a large wirehouse firm. You say, well, how could that be? Well, part of it is just the flexibility. So from a technology standpoint, not only has the technology evolved that is supporting the RIA model, arguably many advisors teams find the technology significantly better than what their wirehouse provides for them. But you also have the flexibility of what technology you want to choose from, where more of a wirehouse type world, it is a package solution. This is what you get. That's what you have to use. And in their defense, honestly, wirehouse firms spend a lot of money on technology and have built out some good technology, but that doesn't mean that what's available to the RIA space is inferior. If anything, it is superior, and again, even more flexibility to go with it. So as you consider, oh wow, should I even go into the RIA model, let alone should I join one? If anyone is telling you, oh, you won't have as good of resources as we, the big, in this example, wirehouse firm, provide you, that's no longer the case. So either the people telling you that are stuck in the past and they don't realize how the world has evolved, or of course they're motivated to tell you that because they don't want you to leave. They want you to stay at their solution. But educate yourself. If anyone tells you that, or you're under the impression things are not as good in the RIA space, or if you were to join an RIA, oh, they can't support a large team, or they can't provide me with the services and solutions that my clients are going to need. That's not the case. And if someone's telling you that, or you're under that impression, you need to educate yourself on that. That's what I help advisors with, is know what do you have now and what is available to you over here. How does it work? So make sure you don't fall prey to misconceptions before you've even taken the time to learn how it now works in the RIA space. The next kind of thought on are you too big to join an RIA? I would tell you, and this is a benefit of what I do and having done it as long as I have, is just the volume of advisors and teams I talk to. Each year I have a couple hundred different advisors or teams typically that reach out to me. And so I hear all different kinds of scenarios. I hear all different motivations for why advisors are looking to perhaps make a change. And I would tell you, again, from experience of hundreds of conversations a year, that you can't, it would make my job easier if I could just simply say, oh, wow, a team with 500 million in assets, they are always better off starting their own RA, or they are always better off joining an RA, and that it's that simple. And I could tell you again from experience, conversations, hundreds of conversations a year on this, that you can't. There's no two teams are alike. So to stay on that number, 500 million, I can guarantee you there are teams out there, advisors out there that say have 500 million. And one team will absolutely, they'll work with me. They'll understand the pros and cons of starting an RA. They'll understand the pros and cons of joining an RA. Again, I help advisors down both, so I'm not biased towards one or the other. I just want to make sure you're educated on how they work, the pros and cons, the ways you go about doing it. But there could be one $500 million team that concludes after all that they absolutely want to start their own RA. And then there could be, I'll call it a similar $500 million team. And even if the client composition looks pretty similar, but they are adamant, they have no interest at all in starting an RA. They want to join an RIA. So there are no easy rules on this that, you're a certain size, that one path is better for you than the other. And so likewise, that goes the same thing. There's no size that you should say, if I'm above a certain amount, I should not consider joining an RIA. Now, who knows what path you ultimately end up on? The key is you need to educate yourself on how they work, how it would look for your practice. And you might conclude that, hey, even if we do have $1 billion or $2 billion, maybe for all the reasons we've come to learn about and discover how we can be supported, that joining an existing RIA solution is best. So the key is, again, no misconceptions going in. You got to educate yourself. You got to understand how it works. And no two advisors, no two teams are alike. So if you have 500 million and you had a colleague that last year had 500 million and left and did X, whether that was start an RA or join an RA, that's helpful, and you can talk to them and hear about their experience and hear why they chose the path they did. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the path that's best for you as well. So be careful with that. And then kind of the final thought before some takeaways on, are you, again, too big for joining an RA, is the economics are not everything in this decision of which path to go down. So I talk a lot about that when I ask advisors and ask teams, hey, what is their motivation for even exploring this and consider this? It typically always comes back into two buckets, either to do with economics, a desire for better economics, or flexibility. They want more flexibility in the practice. And typically it's both. Again, I talked about that in other episodes, not going to go into detail on that. But my point of it is, it's this decision of, hey, are you too big to join an RIA, is not solely economics, right? You want to, if it solely was economics and you said, hey, I want to maximize my bottom line income and I don't mind or I don't care how much additional responsibilities day to day I have to do to maximize that. Well, okay, if that was your reality, then maybe starting your own RAs, because sometimes the economics can be better of that if you're large enough. If you get large enough, some people say, once you have $1 billion, the economics are better if you just do it yourself. And in many instances, that might be the case, but that also comes with the intangible cost of the additional responsibilities you have, the additional day-to-day things you have to do. And that's not as easy to pencil out on that spreadsheet. So just keep in mind, economics is not everything. So the question is, what do you want to get out of this? Is it the benefits of the RIA model? Do you want better economics? Because you can get better economics typically by joining an RIA. But there might be things, again, you just don't want to have to be responsible for yourself. And you say, hey, economics aren't everything. I want generally better economics, but if the cost of the best economics is I have to take on all these additional responsibilities, or I could go this route, get a little lower income, but not have to deal with X, Y, and Z myself, that might be more attractive to you. So just keep that in mind. This is not solely a spreadsheet exercise. It is important to understand how the economics work. But if someone says, once you're above a certain size, the economics are always better to start your own RIA, at some point, perhaps they are. But again, economics is not everything. You kind of get where I'm going. That make sure you're talking about the tangibles, or considering the tangibles and the intangibles that go into this question or decision process. So that's just a couple high-level thoughts, but I did want to leave you with some takeaways as well. So when you're thinking about this, hey, should I start my own RIA? Should I join one? Am I too big to join one? Ask yourself more, what are your motivations for why you're doing this? What are you trying to solve for? So if you want better economics, that's what's motivating you. Great. Let's understand how the economics work on both paths. If you want more flexibility with your practice, great. Let's understand how that works with both paths of your practice. If you want both of those, but you don't necessarily want a whole lot more responsibilities that you don't currently have, great. How does that factor into the decision? So think about what is motivating you, or what would make you content or want to make a change. What does that need to be? And then let's solve for what's the best way to achieve that. And you have to come into that with a blank slate. I talk to advisors all the time that they come in and they're immediately thinking from the first time they reach out to me, oh, they're leaning in one direction. I say, great. Let's fully understand that one direction, but let's also understand how the other direction perhaps works. And at the end of the day, when you're fully informed on that, then you can make a decision and we go from there. So ask yourself, do some soul search. What are your motivations? What are you trying to accomplish? That's what you should be solving for, not some arbitrary, I'm X in size AUM, so here's my answer. It's not that simple. I wish it was. My job would be easier. It's not. We got to look at multiple variables to make that determination. The next takeaway, while I've talked about there being two paths, start your own RIA or join an RIA, keep in mind there are three paths out there. I'm not going to go fully into this episode for time, but there is also a middle path that I talk about at times. That's not as there's not as many resources available in this middle path, but where you can have your own RIA and still outsource a lot of the needed resources you need to a single solution provider. So the point of that is just knowing there's multiple ways in this path. You need to understand how each of the three, and there's different flavors of each of the three to further complicate it, but at the end of the day, there's three main ways into the path. They all have pros and cons. You need to understand how each of them work, how each of them would look for your practice before you can decide which of those paths you should maybe go on. And before you need to understand that at a generic level before you can start worrying about what are the actual solution providers, which RA should I maybe join, or the solution provider, the vendors I need to start my own RA. You first have to understand, well, which of those three models do you want to pursue? And again, then even within that, there's different flavors of that. That's not to give some sales pitch, but that is what I help advisors do at its most core. What are those three models? How do they work? What are the pros and cons? What would it look like for your practice? And then we proceed to depend on which direction you might be leaning. Okay, well, who are the solution providers you would actually need to lean on to be able to make that sort of move? So just keep in mind, there's actually three, not just the two I'm talking about here. We're talking about joining an RIA. You might very well conclude that joining an RIA is the best path for you, but just know there's three that you would want to understand. And then the final thing, and I kind of said this at the top, but is careful who you take advice from on this topic. Again, back to what the whole purpose of the episode. Are you too big to join an RIA? I don't want to dunk on any, but I certainly won't name names or any people out there, but you need to be careful about what the motivations are of whoever's answering that question. And so there's a lot of, headhunting firms, recruiting firms that will cold call you up, and they might be pitching you perhaps only the idea of joining an RA. And again, that's a great solution for many advisors, many teams. But oftentimes the only reason they're pitching that, or they're trying to hard sell you on that, is because they don't know how the other two options work, and they don't have the experience to help you understand them, or the relationships to help you explore them, or whatever the case is. So you just have to always question, okay, why is someone so adamant that I should go on this route? Maybe ultimately that might be the best route for you, but is this person that's cold called me out of the blue or whatever capable of walking me through all of these to make sure I subjectively consider how they all differ? It's always, speaking from experience, because I help advisors down three, it's always easier from someone that's, if you're a recruiter, to just hand you off to some RIA firm and say, oh, hey, they'll take it from here, than it is perhaps to help you figure out all the pieces to start an RIA. The easy path should not be the path. The easy path for some third-party person trying to suggest what you should do should not be the path you necessarily choose. The path you choose should be what's best for your practice, and it might be that path ultimately. But you want to understand all three. Just be careful about what people's motivations are. I hear it. I won't say where, but in industry resources or podcasts, wherever. And I just know people are just touting one one of these paths more than the other. And the reason is just because it's perhaps all they know. They don't have the experience to help you down another path. That's the easier solution for them to be suggested. That's the extent of the relationships they have, is just that particular path. So just careful with who you are getting advice with regarding this. And that's what relates to what I said at the very top. If someone comes along and you ask the question to, hey, am I too big to join an RIA? And they give you some specific number. Oh, no, gosh, above this number, you should be starting an RIA. Immediately question, is there some incentive for them that I should be starting my own RIA because of maybe whatever solution they work for? And that's what the best path is. So just be careful with that. There's some great resources out there. I'm certainly not wanting to paint a broad brush, but I would say I do see it. It does make me cringe at times how certain things are being answered or addressed. And I think there's ulterior motives there that you need to be conscientious of. So with that, as I said at the top, my name is Brad Wales with Transition to RIA. This is what I help advisors with, helping you understand, what do these options look like? What does your practice look like? How might those options align with that? Does joining an RIA make the most sense? What is your size practice? Will they be able to accommodate? Yes, there are solutions out there that can accommodate very large advisors and teams, very large, but not all of them. Some of them that are not going to have the scale, not going to have the capacity to do that. So you need to understand how it all works, who are the providers that can deliver the support and services that you would need to run a successful practice. That's what I do with advisors all day long. Happy to have that conversation with you as well. But I said at the top, first things first, head on over to transitiontoria.com, where you can find all of the resources I make available to help you better understand this model. Again, this entire series is available in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, and at the top of every page is a contact link. If you click on that, you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation with me, whether you want to talk about today's topic or anything else RIA related. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Again, transitiontoria.com. And with that, I hope you found value in today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.